Hey everybody, I'm Tommy. Today's video is going to be the third and final part of how I built this lumber shed for this narrow side yard of my house. Whether it's your first time here, or even if you've been here before, welcome to 1 Minute Workbench. So in parts 1 and 2, I showed all of the prep work, the framing, and building the roof. In this part, I'm going to show the finishing touches, how I added the lumber supports, and how I added this canvas that covers the main opening. As I mentioned in part 1, I pre-cut and pre-painted all of the components of the shed, including these decorative pieces of trim. I did have to shorten them just a bit because of the mistake I made hanging the panels, which I covered in detail in part 2. Using a brad nailer, I shot longer nails in places where framing members were behind the trim, and shorter nails in places where only plywood was behind the trim. This way, no nails would be protruding. I didn't pre-paint the floor of the shed or these supports because I knew I would be adding glue to these. These supports are just to help make the back wall of the shed as strong as possible, since it is what will actually be holding the lumber. These supports are probably overkill, but I wanted to make sure that even if the shelves were completely loaded with lumber, the shed wouldn't have any flex at all. After adding the supports, I noticed that they were closer to the front opening than I'd prefer, so I trimmed them down using a handsaw. This is so that when the canvas is added to the opening, they won't rub against the canvas, which could potentially wear a hole into it. Once they were installed and trimmed, I added a coat of primer and then a coat of exterior grade white semi-gloss. And while I had the white semi-gloss out, I went ahead and touched up the exterior, including painting over all the brad nail heads and painting over any framing nail heads that were still exposed. I also painted over any remaining edges that were visible along the main face of the shed. After that, I came back with red paint and painted over the exposed nail heads and any other places that needed a little bit of touch-up. With the paint drying, I went inside and started working on cutting the pieces of conduit that would become the lumber supports. I created a backstop by securing a piece of wood in my vise. Then I placed my homemade chop saw the appropriate distance from the backstop and clamped it to the workbench. This would allow me to make repeated cuts that were all the correct length without having to measure each one. I cut my first piece and then headed over to the grinder to smooth out the cut. The grinder did an okay job, but there were still small burrs on the inside edge that needed to be smoothed out further with some sandpaper. The sandpaper did the trick. The edge was perfectly smooth and safe to touch. I only smoothed out one end, and I marked the other end with a B to indicate it was the back portion that would get inserted into the hole. I felt I had a pretty good system worked out, so I went ahead with cutting all of the pieces that were going to be needed. And of course, I came back and smoothed one end of each of those pieces. Installation was straightforward. Just place one pipe in each hole while making sure the end labeled B was the end going in. The only thing that holds these in place is the slight angle at which the holes are drilled. This makes it to where if I ever wanted to rearrange these for any reason, I'll easily be able to do so. I started by adding the heaviest and longest boards I had to the very bottom shelf. The shelves performed beautifully with no flex at all, even the ones that carried a tremendous amount of weight. A friend of mine was at the house, and while checking out the shed, he applied some pressure to the lumber on the shelves and made a comment about how rigid and strong they were. He admitted when he first saw the design, he thought they might have some flex to them, but was very impressed with the final results of the actual shed. Organizing the material was a sheer joy compared to the old rack, and I could already tell that retrieving material from it was going to be night and day different as well. The only thing left to do was cover the opening. I could have bought a custom-made canvas that fit perfectly for about $120, but instead I bought this oversized canvas for about $33 from Amazon. The only problem was, now I needed to get it cut down to size. I started by just holding up one corner to get a feel for how much space was going to be needed for each attachment point. I used 1/8 inch paracord to attach the canvas because of the elasticity it will provide. I cut a small piece and then tied a knot to create a loop through the grommet. With that first loop in place, I was able to determine the placement for my first attachment point. I drilled a pilot hole and then threaded it with a 1/4-20 tapping bit. I installed a 1/4-20 carriage bolt into the hole. The carriage bolt has a smooth round head, which will help reduce the chances of getting snagged, scraped, or otherwise injured. With the first attachment point in place, I was able to determine the rest of the attachment points along the top of the opening. Just like the first one, I threaded the holes, inserted the carriage bolts, tied loops, and then attached to the canvas. I did the same thing for the attachment points on the right side of the opening. Since this canvas was oversized, I marked the new dimension I desired at the bottom. This would help me in determining how to cut the canvas down to size. I did the same thing at the top left side of the canvas since it needed to be trimmed in that direction as well. I measured and copied those marks to the opposite sides and then trimmed the canvas. When making my cuts, I left extra material so I could fold and stitch them to match the factory edges. To prepare for the first stitch, I folded and pinned the material in accordance with where the marks had been drawn. I just applied a straight stitch, much like the one on the factory edges. Then, also much like had been done at the factory, I folded the edge under before applying the second stitch. This ensures that the edges won't easily fray apart. With the stitching completed, I moved into the shop to start working on the grommets. I purchased this kit for about $7, bringing the total cost of the canvas up to only $40. Since I had never added a grommet to anything before, I practiced on a scrap piece. The hole punch that came with the kit wasn't very good, but luckily I had a higher quality hole punch kit that included the correct size. With the hole punched, I followed the directions and added my test grommet to the scrap piece. It worked out just fine. I folded the canvas to help me find the center and then added a mark there. I then measured the canvas and continued adding marks. With all of my marks made, I punched holes and then added the grommets just like I had practiced. Once again, I added paracord loops to the grommets. Now that the canvas was down to size, I was able to start finding the new attachment point locations. For the remaining locations, I made them far enough away that it would require some force to loop them around the carriage bolt heads. This is so that the canvas will have a nice tight fit. Using paracord instead of snaps or just pulling the grommets around a stud of some kind is important for a couple of reasons. First, it allows you to put a little tension on the fabric so you have a nice fit, all without having to be precise about your attachment point locations like you would in order to get a good fit with snaps. That in and of itself is very nice, but the next reason is even more important. Because this canvas is cotton, it will shrink over time. If you were to use snaps, the shrinkage would eventually cause the canvas to rip or tear. Doing it this way means that the canvas can shrink and the paracord will just stretch to accommodate the new, smaller size. I'm very happy with the fit of the canvas and very happy in general with the overall final results of this project. The canvas comes off in a jiffy, and being able to see and easily access all of my lumber has made a huge difference. This project cost me just about $400, including all of the hardware, paint, silicone, the canvas, and even the grommet kit. I'm pretty happy with that, especially considering that even most of the plastic sheds I found at Home Depot and Lowe's cost more than that, and none of them are the right size or shape for storing lumber like this, especially in a very narrow side yard. Most of those sheds are designed to go where you have ample room. So with this design, I'm able to get good use out of a space that would otherwise go unused. Hey, thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this project. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe, and make sure you hit the bell icon so you get notified every time there's a new episode. I'd love to hear what you think of this lumber shed in the comment section below, and if you have any quick questions you want answered, hit me up on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. And until the next time I see you, I hope you have fun building something.